think more people need to be told you're beautiful. I think more people need to be told you look really nice today. I think people need to make more jokes, spend more time together, not take every second of this kind of finite journey in our story so seriously. And I think people need to really be able to forgive people, be able to forgive yourself for not knowing the things you didn't know. These are simple things. You can be awake, you can be the most enlightened person in the world, but what's the use of it if it doesn't make you a kinder, sweeter, happier, more relaxed person? Who cares how much enlightenment you have? We're leaders to solve world peace. Yet if our neighbor knocks on a door right now, we'll grab a gun and we'll cock it and we'll be like, what do you want? And like, I just want some water. Get out. If you're not even willing to call a friend who you haven't spoken to in a year and say, I'm sorry. There'll never be world peace. The world will not change until you yourself don't become more open, more loving, more surrendering, more compassionate, more kind.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you, because you know she knows a thing or two. And now she's gonna break down. It's a breakdown. She's gonna break it down.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik.
I'm Jonathan Cohen.
And welcome to our breakdown. This is the place where we break things down so you don't have to. It's kind of an epic episode today.
Someone is returning.
Someone is returning who I think might be one of your favorite people, listeners, judging by how many people have listened to, watched, and shared his first appearance.
Back by popular demand.
Back by popular demand, Kunal Nayyar from The Big Bang Theory. You know him as the lovable astrophysicist Raj Koothrappali, who we just called Koothrappali. And he's been doing a ton of incredible acting work in the years since we've had him on. But we were just kind of missing him. And I literally was like, hey, do you want to come talk? And he literally said, yes.
And if you haven't listened to his first episode, check it out. He shares so deeply. He has an enormous amount of wisdom. He references a few things that he talks about in this episode that he talks about in the previous episode. The way that he started towards enlightenment, the panic attacks that he started to have, his journey to overcome them, the insight that he gained, and how he started meditating, reading a lot of spiritual texts, and really changed his life dramatically. And we get to catch up with him and hear a lot more about what his spiritual life and inner life has been, what's been happening in it.
In particular, he's going to explain to us how his spiritual practice has shifted, why it has shifted, and how he sees his shift as reflective of something that I think is echoing out in a lot of ways for a lot of people. There's a certain amount of fatigue many of us have from working so hard on ourselves. And he's going to talk about how he came to the realization that there's a different way to do it.
To discover yourself, he says.
To discover yourself, to know yourself. What does that mean? We get pretty deep here today, folks. Put on your thinking caps and your feeling caps and open your heart. It's such a pleasure to welcome Kunal. Break it down. You've been doing some amazing acting work. And
Thank
I don't
you.
mean to sound surprised. This is
I
not
can't
how I
believe that. Yeah.
No, but I've known some of the stuff that you've been doing, but when I looked at it all written in one document, you've been doing some really beautiful work.
Thank you.
And I wonder if you'd like to share with the people all the things you've been doing. I mean, like everything. Like it's been
Thank
like
you.
TVs and features and like, I mean, it's some really cool stuff.
I mean, the Big Bang was obviously the greatest gift of our lives, especially, I can speak for myself. But the problem, one of the issues that can happen is if you get stigmatized, is that even a word? If you get stigmatized by
Typecast.
being only a multi-camera actor,
Right.
and someone that's so recognizable on television, still to this day, 8 times a day in people's homes all over the
Right.
world, you get pigeonholed into that similar character. So all the work that I've picked ever since or have auditioned for and gotten has been things that are completely different.
Mhm.
So I did Criminal UK for Netflix, which I got nominated for a BAFTA for, where I played a
Wow.
criminal.
Yeah.
And then I did Suspicion for Apple TV for a season where I played a suspicious character. And then I did a movie called AJ Fikri, the storied life of AJ Fikri, about a book owner in a fictitious island. We shot that in Cape Cod.
Wow.
A guy who had lost his wife and found life again by adopting a daughter that ends up on his doorstep. So I'm also currently about to jump into something very exciting. Gurinder Chadha, who made Bend It Like Beckham, is directing a take on The Christmas Carol. But it's set in diverse London.
Wow.
With an Indian character based on Scrooge called Sood, and I'm playing
That's
this
really cool.
very sort of older a gentleman who's got a lot of pain in his life and exploring where does that pain come from? How does someone turn into that?
Wow.
So
Is there a sort of notion of past, future?
yes, it's very, very close to Dickens' story.
Got
It
it.
really is an homage to Dickens' story.
Right.
It's just that you're seeing
And
obviously
it's
some
called
diversity.
A Christmas Karma?
It's called A Christmas Karma.
That's great. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What I'm not going to ask what your favorite thing has been to do, but what kind of character feels the most satisfying to play?
It's a good question. I really love characters who express themselves through language. So characters that I've gotten to play that have time to be able to speak and use language either as a weapon or a self-defense or anything that they use language to mask. I really like being involved with. And you don't always get that opportunity, but I've been lucky.
Well, and especially on sitcom, you
Yeah.
really don't.
Yeah, or in TV. And,
Right.
you know,
Right.
exactly. And also, to be honest, being ethnic, being South Asian, those are not roles that are completely written with multi layers.
Right.
So I've been lucky to have played some of those characters.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
When I do the math of how many years it's been since Big Bang Theory ended and all of these things, it would be tempting to say, like, you've been very, very busy. Has there also been periods of quiet?
You can't see, but my wife is here. Neha, she's sitting.
I can see. She's
tucked,
right there.
She's tucked in the corner, but she will tell you I have been quite a nightmare the last year to be around, just because of the strike, and then Suspicion season 2 got cancelled. We couldn't do it, and everything got stalled in a way, and so I felt quite directionless without the crutch of throwing myself into my work. We got so used to having vacations, knowing that we had somewhere to go back to. And it's not so much a fear of being irrelevant for me as much as it is really not getting to do the thing that I love. I love acting. And it's not even about acting. I love being on set. I love being around people. This is why when I read reviews or critics' reviews about movies and TV shows, and I try not to anymore because it makes me sad, because I think you haven't even spent 1 second really doing 14 hours a day on a set. This is why it's so hard for me to criticize any form of art, because I know the sacrifice it takes to really do something at a high level. I'm not saying critics are bad. Don't know everything.
Sometimes they're bad.
I'm just saying that it's hard for me to criticize a form of art when I know the sacrifice it takes to actually create something you love. So I have not been I've not been a joy to be around, I hope. But I feel lost when I don't have this thing that I can
of
dive
course.
into.
What do you do when you're directionless?
Besides
Stay
annoying your
put.
wife.
Yeah. So no, we've talked a lot about the inner journey. Though I'm not acting, I'm also doing many other things, But I think it's a great time for self-reflection. I think anytime I feel the pull into the sort of the egoistic side of myself, it's always nice to pull back and say, okay, surrender, more surrender all the time. I think life is just one big surrender, and there's no real destination.
Before we get a little more into that sort of inner journey, I'm just curious, where have you been spending most of your time? Have you been here? Have you been in India? Like, where have you been?
A mix between India, London, LA. Nay has been spending more time in India recently, but London really, because my parents live in India, our parents live in India, everyone is in India, it seems closer. Los Angeles is the furthest place in the world from anything. Even going on vacation is Hawaii, which is 6 hours away. You know what I mean? It's such a big country.
True.
So I really like being in London. It feels like the center of the universe for me.
So we're really grateful that you came back to talk to us because you were one of our early episodes, and as we've sort of circled round in the 3 years that we've been here, like a lot of the things that you talked about are so many of the things that we want to know more about, meaning ourselves, and it kind of feels like a lot of the direction of our podcast has taken us further and further in, and obviously we talk to a lot of different kinds of people. We speak to experts and we speak to celebrities, and we've had some incredible people on, but we also wanted to sort of check in with you and see where your journey has led you, because I think for many people, you were an early voice in social media presence about mindfulness, about inner work, about this kind of contemplative existence in a way that is now kind of part of the vernacular. And like you can buy incense at the local, CVS has like,
That's just
things
me
for
being Indian.
mindfulness.
I just like incense because that's just me being Indian. Yeah.
No, but we're kind of curious, especially like you're at a different point in your career and in your life. And we wanted to sort of see where your journey has led you and what's shifted for you. So we can pick up anywhere. Our podcast has taken us into the realms of altered states of consciousness and what does it mean to, be connected to something bigger than yourself. And we've looked at the neural networks underlying the things that make us feel connected, but you don't need to think about the brain to know that it feels different when you understand yourself and other people as part of a larger whole. The Elizabeth Crone episode talked about near-death experiences, and so we're kind of curious, like where you're at, where's your practice, where does your soul feel like it rests these days as the world gets kind of crazier?
It's a great question. I think I'm trying to think back to now when we spoke, but yes, I think that I have been through the very intense meditation practice. I have been through the very intense reading of every spiritual guru. I have been through the very intense program of meeting some of these gurus and spending time with them and really spending hours and hours and days and months and years on sort of inner reflection. I don't like to call it work. I know some people like to call it work. Doesn't work for me. I really like the word self-reflection. But I also realized that it also became something that was obsessive in nature for the mind to attach itself to. Now, you have to get to the point first where you realize your mind is even attached to see through the illusion of it. But where I am, I think, Mayim, is I had this moment. I can't remember if I spoke about this last time, but I had this moment where I was sitting on a bench. I was in London. I was in a park, and I was looking at these kids playing in the park. And I was looking at the sky, and I'm like, am I the eyes that is looking at the sky, or am I the sky that's looking back at the eyes? And am I the clouds? Who am I that is even and I'm looking at these kids. Am I these kids? Are the so and I just stopped, and then I just burst out laughing. And I realized in that moment, whether I'm enlightened or not, the kids will still be playing in the park. Whether I am the greatest guru to have ever lived, the kids will still be playing in the park. If I have never meditated once in my life, the kids will still be playing in the park. And it all made sense to me that this moment in time does not care what we think about it. It just is. So what I've been really realizing that in this life, there's only experience. How you experience it is up to you. Whether you experience it with no experiencer, whether you experience it through a very tight, filtered sort of lens, if you live it through a mix of it, it doesn't really matter. That the only thing that matters truly is experience. And how you get to experience it, some of it is up to you and some of it isn't.
Right.
So it's almost a kind of boring, simplistic. I'm understanding now. I think people experience and think the experience of enlightenment, if there is even such a thing, is some lights glowing out of your head and you're walking around like, I love you and I love this and I love that. Love can be a big manifestation of waking up. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it is so boring when you wake up in and out of the illusion of the things you believed in. You think for the first moments you're feeling so light and airy, but then when it really settles down, it's just really like having a cup of coffee is as profound as a deep meditative state because they both are states of existence from the same place of looking. So then I guess there's only looking.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by BetterHelp.
So many people walk through our days burdened by the weight of something that we need to get off our chests. Maybe we need to tell something to a family member or a romantic partner, a friend, maybe even our boss. Everybody carries around different stressors. Some are big, some are small, but no matter the size, if we keep them bottled up, it can affect us negatively. Therapy has been a place that I've used to get things off my chest and decide if they're things that actually need to be told to the person or if it's something I just need to process. That's the kind of thing that therapy can be used as a tool for. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch at any time for no additional charge.
Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/break today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/break.
It's so important to us that the supplements we take are of the highest quality, and that's why for the last 3 years, we've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 conducts relentless testing to set the standard for purity and potency. So many people ask us if AG1's actually the real deal, and there's a reason we've been drinking it for so long. Quality for AG1 isn't just a buzzword. They have expert-led scientific research, high-quality ingredients, industry-leading manufacturing, and rigorous testing. They go above and beyond the standards in the industry. They test for 950 contaminants and banned substances. The industry standard, Jonathan, what is it?
It's only 10.
AG1 is NSF certified for sport, one of the most rigorous independent quality and safety certification programs in the supplement industry. Taking care of your health shouldn't be complicated. AG1 simplifies it. You can replace multiple supplements like your multivitamins, digestive aids, immune support in just one scoop. Every scoop has prebiotics, probiotics, digestive enzymes for gut support, and vitamin C and zinc to support our immune health. We've partnered with AG1 for so long because they make such a high quality product. We genuinely look forward to drinking it every day. If you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription at
drinkag1.com/breakdown. That's drinkag1.com/breakdown. Check it out.
I think I'm curious if you can talk more about the tendency, and for me, it's a very Western thing to take something and commodify it, put a price tag on it, make a retreat about it that everybody has to pay thousands of dollars to go to. But when you talk about that obsession, that you can sort of, it's almost like in your attempt to not have obsessions, right? That can become the obsession. Can you talk about, can you talk about, and it could be what you experienced, and I'm not asking you to bash anyone in particular or the culture, that many of us live in. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about why do we do that? What is that tendency? What are we trying to satisfy?
I mean, it's the ultimate game of cat and mouse, right? This whole existence is literally created. Whoever created this game, I don't even know, but it's a brilliant game. It's really a game about discovering who you are. And I'm not saying who you are as in your name and your conditioning. And I mean underneath that, discovering the nature of your existence.
Can you break that down a little more before you go on? Because some people might be like, I don't know, I'm a wife, I'm a husband, like I work here. But talk about what you mean when you say like understanding yourself and the nature of your existence.
See, when you're born,
yes.
Let's start there.
Let's start there.
Or before.
Let's not get into past lives today, but because I don't know much about it. But I will say, you're born, you have some genetic DNA from your father and your mother, obviously. But you're pretty much born a blank slate. I mean, I think you have some conditioning from past generations. If you believe in past lives, maybe past lives. But pretty much you're a blank slate. Now, your name is not yours. It's been given to you. your religion you're kind of born into, your cultural understanding, your education, everything is. Think of yourself as a blank slate that everyone has written a story on, and that has then become you. You, as in that's how you experience the world through the filter of the things that are written on your blank wall.
And if you go to if we take the same child in two different parallel universes, we could send them to two totally different schools, two totally different cultures.
Exactly.
You'd get a different person.
So I think if you slowed this down for a second, and this is very scary for people to do, so I don't, only if you feel up to it, but really if you closed your eyes and you looked within and you really looked at your story as a story, which it is really, who's looking at it?
Mm.
The looker of the story can't be the story, right? Anything that's in front of you that you can objectify can't be you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is what I mean when I say the nature of your existence. Underneath your conditioning and everything you think you are, if you're willing to look, I think there can be a lot of freedom. I think if you can just have a little space between who you truly are and who you think you are, just a little space, I think it brings a lot of peace within you.
So to continue where you were going in terms of how this can become an obsession,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, I mean, I guess your question was, why does it become an obsession?
Yeah.
I don't really know. That's why I said I think whoever designed this game is brilliant, right? But I do think the brilliant thing about this, in my opinion, is everyone wants to go on these retreats and these journeys, and that's fine. Again, this is no judgment because your experience is going to be your story. And then when it ends, some other story will come, right? In your story, you want to get spiritual. You say, I'm having a difficult time. And that's how it started for me. I was really struggling and I wanted to meditate and get better and feel better and everything. Beautiful, feeling good. Now I meditated. Today I meditated 2 minutes. Then I meditated 5 minutes. And I meditated 10 minutes. I'm feeling good. I've become a spiritual person. All beautiful things. But then you realize one day, you go so far deep into it. You're like, oh, for me to really go all the way, there is a part of self-sacrifice. There is a part of complete ego surrender. There is a part of me that has to give up the things that I held so tightly, surrender that to whatever may come. It's a total loss of control. So the thing that you were chasing, which is a spiritual life, whatever, one day starts chasing you. And then a lot of fear sets in if you're not ready. You start running for the hills. You're like, no, I only signed up to meditate. I did not sign up to give up my entire personal identity for the to merge with the universe, whatever that means. So the reason I think people do these retreats and pay money, it's another way to it's another way to stay away from truly, in my opinion, yourself. I think it's just an easier way to continue to stay in your personal identity.
So like I go to this retreat and I put on this outfit. It's my fancy meditating outfit and I
Which
do
is
the
fine,
thing.
yeah.
Right.
Or you go from guru to guru to guru to ashram to ashram to ashram because you're trying to get someone to give you the answer. Or you read, by the way, I'm only speaking from my personal experience. I'm not speaking this is right or wrong. Or you read enough but man, you're right here. You can't be anywhere else.
Right.
This is it.
And when it's commoditized and turned into products, there's a false linear nature applied.
Yes, as there's a destination to get to once you get through the 7th stage of this program. Which again, I'm not saying that because there are actual programs that are designed by yogis and yoga that you can't ascend to unless you've actually, these are deep rooted yogic sciences for 5,000 years. There's a reason there is a linear nature to them because you can't just suddenly go into complete. That's why I find it I think it's a little dangerous for people who are not ready to go into 5 or 10 days of silent meditation.
So it's funny you mentioned this because I thought I had been meditating. I really thought I was doing it.
Okay.
I wasn't doing it because what I was using were very lovely guided meditations, many
Yes.
by very experienced people.
Yes, of
You
course.
know, people who had far more training than I. But what I realized is I was basically just forcing myself to stop doing what I was doing to listen to the voice of someone else. And
Yes.
that's actually not what underlies meditation in terms of like understanding how to get in touch with yourself. So what I did is I started using a program that actually taught me the principles of meditation, which includes all these dark, scary things you're talking about. Meaning,
Mm.
when you get quiet,
Yes.
it just is going to be quiet in there, and all you're going to hear is your own rumination
Yes.
and your self-hatred, your fear, your doubt. And what you do with that is what I have learned is, for me, meditation.
Mhm.
And it is all the things when people are like, I'm too antsy to meditate. I can't stop the voice. That's exactly like, that's the human condition.
Yes.
And some people will just push through it. You know, those people who are like, I can't do yoga. It's stupid. You know, they don't even want to hear it.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is that that's the kind of practice where I literally had to learn
Yeah.
to understand. And that is what will make you go crazy or
Yeah.
bring you to a new level of understanding.
And acceptance if you sit with
Correct.
that inner world.
But I had to learn tools. I
Yeah.
didn't know about this.
And you also, I will say that you had to also go through the first version of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't look back at any of that thing. I think that if you read I read so many self-help books.
Mm-hmm.
They were all very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I never talked down about, you want to spend $1,000 and go for a week to this thing that makes you feel good? Absolutely. It may not lead you to the thing you
Right.
wanted to, but it's something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I also don't believe that this lifetime in this story is for everyone to completely go there.
Mm.
I think some people will just live and die in their sort of identity and live their life, and it's happy. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have to be, I have to wake up from this illusion and then I'll begin my life. I mean, like I said, the kids will still be playing in the park.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You still have to wake up and drink your coffee and go to the bathroom and deal with pain and deal with suffering and then deal with happiness. It is like I had said earlier, it's that people are identified with the waves of the ocean and they don't realize that they are actually the ocean.
Also, waking up is, we have an idea of what waking up is, but it is, some people have it in a profound moment. Other people have little incremental shifts over time. And in terms of linear nature, when you talk about, there are yogic sciences, there are what we are seeing more and more in the bridge between Eastern and Western traditions is that the brain does begin to rewire itself. Neuroscience is showing that these practices allow us to make fundamental shifts in the brain. So the person that starts at level 1 can't just start and go to level 10 because in the process of going from 1 to 10, their brain is actually shifting. And part of that process allows them to have a greater capacity to disconnect from the story because it allows room. Like if you're terrified all the time and your brain is in hyperdrive and you're clinging and trying to figure everything out because you don't feel any sort of safety, it's very difficult to start making a change to wake up because you don't have an openness for something else.
It can be, I think what happened to me in the beginning when I first had my first panic attack on the highway was a small sort of crack in my illusion of what I thought I was. I think it was suddenly fear out of nowhere because I had no understanding of who I was. And it was on the highway. And I think I don't think that everyone is ready to experience that kind of thing.
Well, and in our culture, what we're told to do is like go to the doctor and get a pill.
Yeah.
Right? When you feel that, oh, that sounds terrible. Let's
Yeah.
lower your ability to essentially be disturbed by it. And I don't disparage people who take medication. That's not what this is about. But the notion, and I was talking about this with my kids who are now 15 and 18, like an adult and trying to be, meaning almost there. And the notion of trying to explain when something hurts, that's your body telling you something. And sometimes medicine is needed, right? Sometimes healing is needed. But what's the body trying to tell you? We're not taught to approach the mind that way, right? When something disturbs us, that's exactly what, I think we need to teach, especially the next generation, to think about. What is this telling you? What are you afraid of? You have to dig, It doesn't just go away.
Yes, but it's easy to take a pill. And some people take a pill, some people read 20 books.
Right.
There's many ways to numb
Right.
this ultimate sort of angst or fear that we feel. I don't know how deep we can get today, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
also want people watching this to sort of understand that it's much simpler.
mhm.
It's really much simpler. You don't need a book to tell you about how to live your life.
Mm.
If I told you today, you're not a problem that needs solving.
Mm.
Just think about that for a moment. You're not a problem that needs solving. Yeah, you may have some things. You look at them, okay. Maybe you'll solve them in this lifetime, maybe you won't. Just go out, go dancing today.
Mm.
Go out, go have that cup of tea with your friend. Go for a nice long walk. It's easy for me to say because I'm not, a single parent with 3 kids or something like, it's easy for me to say, go take that. But I mean, we're so used to when I figure this out, then I'll live my life.
There you go.
Right? That's so, as opposed to it just being, this is life.
Mm-hmm.
The only destination is this body will become manure. I don't know. You bury the dead, you burn the dead, whatever. Ultimately, it's the same thing that a fruit is made out of. It'll just crumble into the ground. It'll become great manure for some more plants to grow out. That's the only thing that we know for sure. Everything else is just, let's see what happens and try our best at it. So I think that more people need to be loved. I think more people need to be told you're beautiful. I think more people need to be told you look really nice today. I think people need to make more jokes, spend more time together, not take every second of this kind of finite journey in our story so seriously. And I think people need to really be able to forgive people. I think really be able to forgive yourself for not knowing the things you didn't know. And these are simple things. You can be awake, you can be the most enlightened person in the world, but what's the use of it if it doesn't make you a kinder, sweeter, happier, more relaxed person? Who cares how much enlightenment you have if you don't, we want world leaders to solve world peace. Yet if our neighbor knocks on a door right now, we'll grab a gun and we'll cock it and we'll be like, what do you want? And like, I just want some water. Get out. There will never be world peace if you're not even willing to call a friend who you haven't spoken to in a year and say, I'm sorry. There'll never be world peace if you can't look within and say, you know what, today I made you feel bad because you put on a little weight or whatever. You still look beautiful. I think the answer to everything starts in here. And it starts with the simple things, being kind to your neighbor. We talk about world peace. All these world peace conferences, world leaders giving speeches, but do they have 1 ounce of peace within them? It doesn't. The world will not change until you yourself don't become more open, more loving, more surrendering, more compassionate, more kind.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Nurex.
Nurex's licensed medical providers possess in-depth knowledge and expertise in a range of common health concerns, helping patients find the right treatment options based on their preferences and health history. No more one-size-fits-all approaches, only effective, tailor-made solutions. Nurex's care model is designed to grow with women. From birth control to wrinkles and dark spot treatment, Nurex understands women's healthcare journeys are unique and ever-changing. That's why Nurex's care model provides comprehensive treatment options specific for women so that they can receive ongoing, high-quality, integrated care all in one place. place. Women can count on Nurex to provide transparency and resources to make informed decisions about their health. With access to 24/7 care and support, their patients have the freedom to ask questions and get real answers when they need it most. Taking control of your reproductive health starts with Nurex. Their medical team is here to help with a wide range of reliable reproductive and sexual health care needs, accessible right from home, no judgment or stigma attached. To date, Nurex has delivered birth control to more than 1.6 million patients in the U.S. With Nurex, you've got options. They offer more than 50 birth control formulas, including options for the pill, patch, or ring. Skip the in-person appointment. Complete a medical consultation anytime, day or night, and a Nurex provider licensed in your state will review your health history and, if medically appropriate, prescribe treatment for you. It's not always easy to access birth control, but Nurex is helping patients take back their autonomy with fast and affordable expert care. They accept many major insurances to pay for birth control prescriptions and deliver straight to your door in discreet packaging. No trips to the pharmacy necessary. Thank you to Nurex for sponsoring this podcast. Taking control of your reproductive health starts here. Go to nurex.com/break to get started. That's NURX.com/BREAK. Results may vary, not offered in every state. Medications prescribed only if clinically appropriate. Consultation required.
Mayim Bialik's breakdown is supported by Airbnb.
Jonathan and I both love staying in Airbnbs, especially when we're away for somewhere longer than a day or two. Helps me keep my nutrition on track. If I have a kitchen where I can, cook and do all the things that I need. One of my other favorite things about staying in Airbnbs is you get to stay in a novel place every time. You never stay in the same place twice. And it kind of feels like you're home away from home. I know so many people who could be hosting their spaces while they're away so that other people can enjoy them. And a lot of people don't realize they might have an Airbnb of their own right under their noses. You might be thinking my space couldn't be an Airbnb, but you know what? That's not true. If you're concerned about the time commitment, you can Airbnb your place even just like a few weeks a year when you're traveling, especially if you're someone who loves to host. All those little details that really elevate a space and make it unique, that really matters. Airbnb hosting is a way to earn extra money and make sure that your space is being utilized, even if it's just when you're out of town. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. In the past year, I've gotten into a Kundalini yoga practice, which is its own, it's its own universe. It's very specific, and it's a lineage that, has complexity. I'd like to, acknowledge that. And also, the overarching principles are, about realizing the power that we individuals have to be part of a collective, these kind of things you're talking about, love and beauty. And, one of my teachers, who's a very, very serious practitioner and a very serious person, when we're doing some of our mudras, she'll very, over the sound of the music and the chanting, she'll say, you're beautiful. Stop speaking poorly to yourself. Don't listen to the messages your parents gave you. And it's very intense. And it's like you're crying, but you're also happy. And it's very, very intense. But what it reminds me of as you're talking is many people find this source that you're talking about, this source of love and compassion. Many are finding it in altered states. And I don't just mean psychedelics, but obviously that's a place that people are getting
mushrooms,
it.
MDMA,
yes, ketamine, all these things. So
sometimes even a glass of rosé. I mean, whatever, some kind of substance.
Well, and some people are getting it from holotropic breath work.
Yeah.
And people are having experiences from the womb, things that even scientists are how do we explain, right? Where are these memories? Where are they stored? How are we accessing them, right? But what I think about is also this notion of, in the early days of psychedelic research, right, which was around the time of the Vietnam War, right? What all of these proponents for research were saying was, we found a way to make people feel like they're part of a collective whole that could never hurt another person over a political battle, right? For example. And what they said is even marijuana. They were like, people who are stoned do not want to fight. They want to sleep, right? They want to have sex and they'd like to eat, right? So when you talk about this, I wonder, is there a place where you have some sort of opening into understanding what people are seeking in these altered states, whether it's from breath work or from deep yogic practice, or for many people with, psychedelics. Is this the thing? If you had to say the thing about our existence, right? Is to be in touch with love, kindness, generosity. First of all, is that sort of what everybody's seeking? And is there do you believe there's a universal kind of coding for us to seek that? Because is that what we're here for?
I don't know what we're here for. I have spent many a moment trying to discover that.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are tired. I
Mm.
think people feel tired a lot because I think everyone is exhausted of holding up the illusion of themselves. And I think why we are running away from, or why we're doing all these things is, well, of course, we want to feel happy,
Mm-hmm.
right? We all want to feel happy. We want to feel the good chemicals in our body and we want to feel that way.
That's pleasure principle, right?
Yeah, but we not always going to feel happy. There are days we're going to be sad. Pain is going to come. Trauma is going to come. I don't think anyone gets to really escape this in this life. I think we have to experience all of it. I don't think utopia exists within us either. I think, yes, you can have some euphoric states, but I think that everyone in this life, you will lose someone, you will get sick, things will happen in life. I think that we need to normalize that and stop running away from moments when we don't feel great and say, hey, I don't feel great. Okay, I don't feel great. And then it won't last forever. And then you feel slightly better and then you move on. I do think that these principles that we're talking about, love, compassion, are very natural to us. I think it's very unnatural for us to hurt someone physically, unless either we've seen it ourselves or it's happened to us. I don't think it's natural for anything in this universe to hurt another without either self-defense or extreme provocation. That being said, just going back to like the normal stuff, what I was talking about earlier, it's easy to say, just be loving when you feel so horrible inside. I do think, though, everyone, if you're listening to this, to take a moment to self-reflect. A moment to put the phone down, a moment to build a practice of silence. What worries me, I don't know if our generation is the last generation to have known the world without the internet. I don't know, maybe.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. But if your only lens into this world is through another lens, which is a phone or social media, I mean, I don't understand how you would ever get out of that cycle. Maybe it'll all change. Maybe we'll go back to simplicity. I don't really know. I'm saying a lot, I think, because I feel a little self-conscious sometimes talking about peace and love and compassion from a position of feeling peaceful, compassionate and loving. I don't.
What's the self-consciousness? Because you shouldn't feel guilty for feeling that.
I just wish I could tell everyone in this world, truly, they're beautiful. And that you're fine where you are. And I wish I could hug everyone and say you're okay. And that you're just a kid and everything's going to be fine. And even in the deepest and darkest of moments, there will be a light that will come to you. I've been in those deep moments. I've been in those dark moments. And I think I would much rather you don't spend 20 hours meditating and go out and have some fun. And throw away all the books for a moment. And just live completely and utterly without listening to anyone. And just absolutely allow yourself to be yourself. I think there'll be a lot of relaxation in people. I think we're all trying to live someone else's life. And you are just where you're supposed to be. And that's enough.
What is pain then? Meaning, from your perspective, is it, it's a potential lesson, it's an open, I like this notion that even in darkness, right, you can only see light if there's dark as contrast, right? But I guess that's one of the things I think about, right? That's what a lot of people, a lot of people who are suffering, and there are people who are suffering, the
100%.
question is like, why, right? Why me? And a lot of people would say, well, why not you, right? What would your sort of perspective on that be?
Why do people feel pain?
No, what is that? What is that an opportunity for?
Well, I mean, of course, pain is an opportunity to find the end of suffering.
Right.
Right? You said earlier, you don't know what's good if you don't know what's bad, and you don't know what's bad if you don't know what's good. Pain is, I think Rumi said, right? The wound is where the light enters. That is literally.
Leonard Cohen also said, everything has a crack in it. That's how the light gets in.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that is absolutely it.
I didn't mean to up Rumi with Leonard Cohen.
No,
but,
I don't know. I wasn't going to say anything about it, but hey. I think pain exists because it is a great way in which to look for ease of suffering.
Hmm.
And maybe that's why people do go to all the retreats in the world, to ease their suffering.
There's something that struck me both when you're talking, and then I want to reflect to you for a second, but when you were talking, teeing up 2 questions ago, I just found it just struck me that like we have the ability to feel love, and yet and children express this the most. Animals also, puppies especially. No one is more excited to see anyone than a puppy is. Yet it's almost conditioned out of us, and then in adulthood we have to go back and learn to love, and as you say, tell someone they're loved and give up the anger we have. And Mayim and I have been talking and more interested in the intersection between science and spirituality, because some people can hear what you just shared and they feel it viscerally. When you said you felt self-conscious, what I wanted to reflect back to you is that...
Did you want to tell him he's beautiful?
Yes, very. But what you're able to do so powerfully is you're able to tap into a resonance and communicate it. When you say you wanted to hug everyone, when you want everyone to feel they're just okay for a minute, that everything will be okay, beyond words, which I thought is interesting because you like characters that want to communicate in words. What you're actually doing, what I feel viscerally, somatically, is that you are sending out a resonance. It's almost this energetic frequency, and you're able to tap into it in a way. And so many people are stuck in the illusion. The illusion prevents us from feeling the narrative that we're cycling in, because the mind is so powerful and so in control that we're not able to tap into that vibration. We're not able to tap in to let go of anything. And so it takes people who have had the experience, who have been able to re-articulate it back to say, hey, this frequency exists. Try tapping into it, whether that be intellectually and they get caught on something someone says, or whether they just feel it and they don't really understand why they're feeling it. And what just struck me is like, why? And now, through the phones, because there's no downtime, I used to wander in the woods. My parents would say, go out of the house and like just figure things out. And I remember I grew up in Toronto in the winter, and I remember walking on snowbanks, imagining the little crystals of the snow were little cities that I was like crunching through, and imagining what was underneath them. And like the imagination had time to roam. Now the kids, they don't have any of that. They don't have that time period. So not only are they distracted by all the information coming in, they've lost an ability to feel because their feelings are being hijacked. So this is a little bit circuitous, I guess, but I think it's important that, we have people who shine that vibrational frequency that says, hey, wait a second, there is something else out there. Can you feel it in a moment? And also from a scientific standpoint, what we're seeing is that when people do feel okay for a minute, when they're able to pause, when they're able to say someone, I love you, you're beautiful, everything is going to be okay, even in the worst scenario, that this is life and I can't fight life, and we have an acceptance, what we see is that the brain changes. The electrodes, the electric activity in the brain goes from red state when it's shown on EMFs, EEGs. Mayim and I both got our brains scanned recently, and they show the activity.
It's a resting state EEG. Like, what is your brain like when you're just supposedly doing nothing.
They've done these, I think, studies on Buddhist monks also, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
So they're showing the long-term activity of meditation, but they're also showing that when you get into the vibrational frequency that you are talking about, that the energetic energy of our systems fully changes.
I think it's physical too. I think physical touch, physical love, holding someone, physically nurturing them, touch. These are all things that release those chemicals that we're talking about. Also, you talked about the ability to tap into that frequency. I think it's very interesting to discuss that for a moment because it's not a trick in the sense our minds are powerful, but we all have it within us. It's not in the frequency. I'm saying that it's not the beauty of this kind of talk and this kind of self-reflection is you don't have to be a special kind of guru to experience love and compassion, and this lives within all of us. The reason I think you're right that a lot of people don't experience those things is because we hold on to our ideas of right and wrong so extremely tight that if you rub up against my idea, we're gonna go at it. You know what I mean? But if for a moment you're able to look at your likes, your dislikes, your opinions, your conditioning, and just for a moment let it be. I think in that moment when you let it be, you can find a lot of peace.
100%. And the juxtaposition and contrast is getting worse because we're programmed by algorithms to be in conflict because that is the most profitable way to maintain attention, which is the challenge of the attention economy, is that there are all these incentive structures. And Mayim doesn't like when I go too far down this rabbit hole.
You lost me at incentive.
But it is important because when we pick up our phones, we don't realize that we are being conditioned by a profit motive that wants to enrage us. And it's fascinating to me that both the same instruments and tools that allow this type of information and frequency to be shared and people to feel something and tap into something is also on the same regard being used to increase the division.
Well, what is your algorithm? I mean, my algorithm is puppies and basketball. So I also tell people what it is. Sorry, I don't tell anyone anything, but I encourage people to. There is a lot of stuff happening in the world, okay? There's always been stuff happening in the world. But you are responsible for how much of it you allow in. And of course, the algorithm also. But I think that there's a balance between what you allow in and what you don't allow in. And that responsibility, you can take charge of.
What you permit persists.
Yeah, I think that, yes, of course, there's war, but there's also on a daily basis incredible love. There are incredible stories of people who are doing things on a daily basis that are nice and loving and nurturing. And we don't hear those stories, obviously, like you said, because
they're not prioritized.
Exactly, they're not prioritized. But if we just threw everything away, like this whole discussion, if we just threw away, which you won't because it's a great podcast, but everyone has to be responsible for themselves. You can't continuously say it's everyone else's fault but mine. You know, all this, the world is a scary place. Okay, but are you going to take responsibility for not being a scary person? Are you going to take responsibility? Everyone is just so mean. Well, why don't you be the catalyst of love? When are you going to take, you don't need a book to tell you that. You don't need a retreat to tell you that. When are you going to take responsibility for yourself and not continuously blame everyone else? And that's the harsh reality of the truth is you have to take this into your own hands. And unless you're willing, no amount of books or meditation retreats or anything is ever going to help until you can look within and say, it's time that I become the source of love and not search for it through everyone else.
This goes to what you were saying, that everyone has the capability to feel this.
Yes.
Yeah, I actually wanted you to talk a little bit more about that. It's not a podcast if I don't mention giving birth without drugs, because it's one of my favorite mind over body experiences. And what I always say is like, it doesn't take a superhero, right? Meaning when you look at,
We have a bingo game.
Jonathan says there's a bingo game that some people are playing. Like if Maya mentions home birth, they get like a little piece on their bingo
Because you
card.
gave birth without any pain
Yeah,
medication.
yeah.
Yes.
Where did you give birth?
Oh, well, Fred was born out in the living room.
You passed over where
you
he was.
literally
That's
walked
okay.
over where he was
yeah.
born. But what I always say is, and people will say things like, "No, how did you? That's impossible." No, it's really not a superpower. It's nothing. It's your own mind has the ability to control your perception and understanding of the sensations of squeezing a watermelon through a garden hose, and it is not a traumatic, horrifying, experience. But yeah, it involves mental training.
Extrapolate that. Though.
And at the time that I decided to give birth with no drugs, I wasn't even particularly enlightened or even understanding of the deeper path that I was about to embark on. I wish I had known to use those tools on all of the emotional pain that I had experienced. But for me, that was kind of the beginning of my journey.
Yeah.
And, it took, a person, I mean, you're teaching yourself, it's self-hypnosis, which really means you're learning to go into a deep meditative state where you're changing the waves of your brain and you're changing the language that you use. So, for example, you don't call it a contraction. Contraction's a very hard word. It's got an RCT. It's like a k, right? We call them surges. So when you're having that, since it's like the surge is kind of like, oh, here comes the next surge. But part of that, and people would say, that's ridiculous. It's actually not, because that's how the human brain is wired. It's wired to understand language, to interpret language, and our bodies will react differently. There's a reason that we tense up when we hear harsh words, right? There's a reason that certain words are more soothing. There's a reason that babies say the consonants ma as one of their first things they say. It's because that's what forms around a breast to nurse. Right? That's mother, right? That's that connection. So when you said that it's not, this isn't something that you need to go up on a mountain for. And you can find it on a mountain, right?
You still have to come down and live here.
You still have to come down and live here. And it was Buddha that's, right? I think it was Buddha that said, believe nothing that I say. Even if you hear it from me, if it doesn't ring true to you, it's not your truth, right? But this notion that we all have this capability, it's not a superpower. You don't need to be from India. You don't need to take a class. You don't need to do ayahuasca.
No, I'm joking.
No, but meaning, but if you look at it like this is the human experience, right? We're all spiritual beings having a physical experience, right? This likely is not, in my opinion, this is not the only time your soul is going to be here. I just don't believe that. But even if it is, you're having this physical experience. You're in this body, which is just a vessel. Yeah. It's just a vessel. When my father passed away and I looked at the bed and I said, that's the vessel that was my father. Yeah. It wasn't my father. It's the body that this brain interpreted as that's dad, right? But that's not where he was. That's not where the lessons that he taught me are, right? There's a self that we all have. And it's not a superpower to get there.
That's what you were doing when you had separated yourself from your mind. When you look at your mind and you see you're not your mind, that you can actually just sit here and look at your thoughts. There's not much going on in my head right now. I was trying to find something, but
it happens to people when they come on our podcast.
But look, Sadhguru right now is just recovering in hospital because he had a horrible brain bleed.
Yes.
Sadhguru for 4 weeks had he had a brain bleed. Can you imagine the intensity?
The pressure.
The pressure of pain that he was feeling. Had to be rushed in after 4 weeks of having a brain bleed because he had a second one because the pain was so intense. Said, I have a meeting at 6 p.m. today, so I can't do surgery. Goes to his meeting at 6 p.m., says, I have an 8 a.m. breakfast. I'll come after breakfast. He's hopped up on pain meds. He's not against allopathy or anything. He's a great believer in the mix, the amalgamation of science and spirituality. But extreme pain.
Mm-hmm.
but not attached to his body,
Mm.
right? So I think that everyone has this ability. So for some people, this just sounds like hokum, right? I get it. By the way, I get it. Doesn't matter. You have the ability to do it.
He actually says that our body is the greatest creator of
Chemical factory in the world.
Yeah.
It is.
Mhm.
And tuning. So for me, I think about tuning, tapping into what are we tapped into? If this is the greatest chemical factory of the world and our perception is the guide to what chemicals it should create, and the mind is a co-creator in that, the perception leads to the thinking, which leads to either I'm happy and I feel love, or I'm angry and upset all the time, and you're going to create whatever chemicals you want, then you are responsible. There are inputs that are impacting us, but ultimately I'm responsible for where I tune my gauge.
Agreed 100%. Simpler than that, even. I think if we all were able to see the elusive nature of our thoughts, like our thoughts are not real.
Mm.
I think if we can really just tap into just this much, that your thought is not reality. It doesn't exist anywhere. It's just a thought,
Mhm.
right? Most people their reality is their imagination, not the reality, right? Most people are just living in their imagination because the thoughts are creating the reality. But a thought is not real. Where is it? It's not real. It's not tangible. A thought may have a tangible effect on your body,
Yeah.
but in itself is not a tangible thing. And I don't know how many thoughts we have a day. Some more than, yeah.
A lot.
But I think that if you can just look at it and realize it's not real, it's not reality. Reality is this.
Mhm.
Even the effort to try to be present in itself is not being present, because that's a thought. If you just stopped everything right now, you're right here. You can't be anywhere else. This is it. That's what I said earlier. I started this whole conversation by saying where I am right now is not trying to stay present, but really just living life and experiencing it as Kunal and seeing what happens.
That goes to back to the linear nature of things, where yes, you can't go from 1 necessarily to 10, but as you get towards wherever it goes, I'm kind of, for people only listening, I'm kind of motioning to the right side, starting on the left, going to the right. It kind of folds back in on itself.
Yeah. Adya Shanti used to say that, you go up this mountain and you get your enlightenment, but you have to come down the mountain and live here for you to truly be for your awakening to be complete. Because there's no point of doing it if you're not going to. I mean, the ultimate test, if you truly are waking up or not, is how you deal with other egos around you.
So I was just going to
Right?
say, when I think about friends who've studied in ashram, or who have gone to a monastery, or I would imagine that there's a certain ease that comes with not having to deal with other people. Like, I feel like if I didn't have to interact with anyone, I could be really peaceful.
Agreed.
Right? But the notion of, how do I behave with grace? Also when you're managing small people, right? Or interacting with people who you are not in control of their behaviors, feelings, thoughts, right? What I was thinking is, when you talk about this sense of, it's a sense of expansiveness, that even if you're in pain, even if something is hard, to have this knowledge of this other part of you, right? It's your higher self, that I'm going to be okay. For me, that's the place where I've been able to not shout at my children, literally, to not snap at this one as much.
I get it.
Because the notion is, I may be in pain, I may be struggling, you may be struggling, but if I can zoom back, if I can shift that lens and say, we're in a moment, right? This is a hard moment, this is a challenging moment, or you woke up on the wrong side of the bed because you're a teenager and I'm not in control of that, right? To be able to say, there's more than this. I don't live and die on this breakfast, right?
See, but what you're explaining right now is wisdom, right? You're speaking from a place of wisdom. I may be contradicting myself because I earlier said it's not the work. it's not also easy. I mean, if it was easy for everyone to wake up and walk around and be peaceful and forgiving, then everyone would be walking around like a Buddha, right?
Mhm.
But it takes a lot of self-sacrifice and
Mm.
self-surrender at the cost of maybe yourself even feeling
Mm.
like it took a lot out of me to call that person. It took a lot out of me to forgive that person. It took a lot out of me to not shout back at that person. That does take practice.
That's what
and
people,
time.
and that's what people want to know. They want to know, how do I get there? And I'm not saying you have to have the answer. If you do,
Well, I
please
mean,
share it. But like, that's what people want to know. Like, how do I get there? And that's where you can try so hard to get there, right?
I think that it's not, I think it's manifold. I think some of that is getting to know your true nature through self-reflection. I think some of that is when you stop holding your story so tightly, you in general become a less confrontational person because it doesn't matter if your opinion is not really heard.
Yeah. Can you talk more about what does it mean to hold on tightly to your story? I mean, I'm sure I do it, but can you define it?
I guess, right now you're living your life as Mayim, and Mayim has these thoughts and these beliefs. And through that filter
Right.
of your likes, your dislikes, your beliefs, your
Right.
opinions, through that filter, you're seeing the world almost like fragmented.
That's why people do drugs, because it opens it up.
unfragments
I mean,
their
you could do it
minds.
other ways. Just
Yes,
saying.
but that's why people come home and pour themselves a glass of whiskey or
Right.
whatever it is.
Well, that to me,
Okay, maybe, sorry, I'm using the
Yeah.
the wrong chemical. You're right.
Right.
You're talking about psychedelics.
That to me makes this feel like you don't have to hold on so tight.
Okay,
but
that's
it's
true.
still really the filter. I mean, numbing to me is still filtered.
I understand.
Yeah.
So
But
I guess
like to open it up. Yeah.
I guess going back to that is,
Yeah.
is you're right. But looking, when I say holding on to that story, is your belief that that story is real,
There we go.
right? Your belief is, this is me.
Right.
And then there's all of those other people and all those other things.
And that could be bad things or good things, right? It
Oh,
could be
yeah.
anything.
But if anything is in conflict with me, who you take yourself to be, which is just a story, psychological story, then there's instant conflict. If someone is not in congruence with your story, then there's instant conflict. So that's what I mean by holding on to that tightly. I'm not saying it's a fine line here. And I just want to go on to one thing here, because a lot of people get into spirituality and they say, I've got to destroy my ego. I got to get rid of my personality. It's nonsense. Okay? The only thing trying to destroy your ego is your ego, by the way. Because if you truly look at it, there's nothing to destroy, right? It just is.
MC Yogi says you have to surrender it.
Yeah, or surrender it.
Right.
But is the I can't go into this today. Because I can't go into, is the surrenderer
I have to have you
then
back
the
another
one
day
being
so you'll go into
surrendered?
it?
No, I think
Oh,
that
okay.
it's very tricky to get into perceiver and perceived and surrender and who's surrendering what.
Yeah.
And are you the surrenderer or you the one being surrendered? It's very
But
tricky.
the act of breaking ego is an ego act as well.
Is my point that Buddha had a personality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jesus had a personality.
Mm-hmm.
All the enlightened beings in the world have had personalities. It's just that they never took their personality so seriously. They surrendered their personality for the better of all the people in the world to say, hey, I am you and you are me. Does not mean you don't walk this world without any personality. It's just nonsense. This is what it is. I think we're all afraid. All of us. What are we protecting? Let's just go into this. What are you protecting? What are you so afraid? Someone walks down the street and says hi to you. Right. Well, in LA, sometimes you're protecting your your physicality because it's become a crazy place. But what are we so afraid of giving up if we say we're sorry? What is it that we're so afraid of if we say to someone, I forgive you?
Right. So being right about something. That's a good example, right?
That's a great example.
I'm right. He should apologize first. He hurt me more than I hurt him, whatever.
What are you protecting?
You're protecting your ego, but
you're protecting what you think is yourself.
Right.
Because you've never looked in and said, who am I?
Right.
But I guess it goes back to that.
Sure.
once you realize that the thing that you're protecting in itself is really just an illusion, then life becomes quite easy to not constantly walk around like you're at war with someone, because you're no longer holding up the thing that everyone's so tired because they're holding up a thing that doesn't have in its own innate nature and existence.
So is there a tendency though, and maybe I'm asking this as a female person, and not that men can't feel it too, is there a fear though that I shouldn't ask you, I have a fear
Mm.
of being a doormat, of being so loving, giving, generous, open that I get taken advantage of. And that's probably, there's something there as well. But where's that line? Am I the only one? Is no one agreeing with me?
No, I think that's what I think that's what you're answering the question of.
Anyone? No?
I think you're answering the question of what it is that you're afraid of, right?
Right.
But I guess I could pause it then to you, back to you, and say, who's afraid?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, who is the one that feels fear?
And I'm already thinking there's a story to that, right? Women get taken advantage of, right? Or this happened, meaning I have a story about why I have a fear of something that also may not have even happened to me, right? But those are the stories we hold, right? Do you know what I'm afraid of?
I have seen things arise when you become more defensive than open.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that is...
And vice versa, maybe?
And vice versa, absolutely. And sometimes that's physical safety. Sometimes it's an anticipation of a perceived threat based on something that's outdated because, you know, we're all meaning-making machines. We can't help but try and like in our survival, we anticipate risk based on the past. Can't help it. So part of the narratives that we're holding on to are technically ingrained in us to help us survive, find resources, avoid lions and threats, avoid in the present day, avoid
social media trolls.
Modern day lions.
But mostly emotional pain from our past that we may not know is there, landmines that then we bump up into, and then we're trying to prevent against that. And so when you go talk about pain, actually that pain is the biggest opportunity to show where the landmines are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to sort of self-inquiry. I want to touch upon something you said earlier that I thought was very lovely, which is you said animals are very pure in that way, and as are children, very pure in that way. I think it's because that sense of self or that sense of story has not been formed so solidly. It has not cemented itself as it has when we're adults. And because that has become cemented, then we spend the rest of our life trying to uncement it. So it gets cemented. And then if you go again far enough on this journey, and if you see people who are truly have done a lot of deep thinking and really been on a journey like this, they almost are like childlike. They're very like, I feel like I'm the best sort of, when I'm really in just flow with everything is mostly when I'm the most open and childlike and pure and not so ingrained in my idea of the way I think things should be, right?
That's creativity also. That's what Rick Rubin says. That's what flow state is, right? It's when we play in that open, space. I mean, also then you're an actor, right? We literally play for a living.
We play or we just torture ourselves with self-inquiry. I mean, I think that I think acting is Osho said this, and no matter where you stand on Osho, he said some very beautiful things. And one of the things that he said, and I'm going to butcher this, so please forgive me if you are a big fan of Osho and you know this quote, but he said acting is the most spiritual of all jobs because it's the self playing a character that they totally believe in. That you are creating a character that you have completely believed in and you're acting like them in front of society.
I mean, I believe in my characters I've played more than I believe in myself.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's you're living in a box.
But that's because you're neither. You're not the character and you're not the... I'm saying that you're...
Right.
The character that you believe is Mayim and the character that you believe in your acting world is still roles through the source of creation.
But Jonathan was asking me that. He sometimes asks me deep questions about acting that I intuitively often have answers for, even though I'm not classically trained. You
Doesn't matter.
I know, but just I'm saying.
It can be a crutch sometimes.
Well,
too.
right. Well, so sometimes Jonathan will ask me things like that, and you know,
What did I ask you?
well, no, we've talked about method and what it means. And, you know, I'm very interested in method, obviously.
For those of you who
the,
don't know what method acting is, it's when you literally breathe and live the character when you're off stage as well. So if you ask for a cup of tea as the character you're playing and he speaks like this, then you get the coffee like this. You know, that's sort of what it is.
And yeah, method actors, you know, often sort of act the role for the extent of the time that they're creating that role, both off and on.
Must be a joy to be
screen.
around.
Have you ever done that, Kunal?
Not necessarily. No, I do a lot of the work uh, off screen, and then I find myself a lot more healthy when the yell cut. I'm able to
Mhm.
just hang out with the crew and be part of this supportive environment where people are for me. But it doesn't matter when the camera's rolling, whether you're truthful or not truthful. That's all
Right.
that matters.
Well, and that's sort of what you know we've spoken about in terms of states that we possess and states that we inhabit. You know, when I'm in a role, I have to think. You know, you think like that person. You think like this character. How do you move and how do you stand and how do you posture? And I think especially for us on Big Bang, we both had characters that had a very specific kind of posture about them, right?
Yeah.
Like a very specific look that was like part of, you know, our characters. And so there's this notion of, you know, I don't mean to be existential about it, but like, who are we? Right?
Yeah.
I inhabit this character. And if you do a film, right, you get a longer chunk of time. But if you work for 12 years on a show, that's, you know, that becomes who you are. But I had a question that's a little bit out there, but I'm just sort of curious. There are people who, you know, there are many modalities for healing that more and more people are talking about. Jonathan and I have tried all of them twice. But the one that I wanted to ask you about came up when you were talking about your story. And there are people who believe in ancestral trauma.
Of course.
That you are holding, you know, you're holding either pain or sometimes joy, that you're holding an experience for the generations that came before you. And, you know, this used to be this sort of very out there concept, you know, that healers would throw around and past life regressions try and tap into it. But, you know, what
It's not so out there. It's
Well,
outside.
so-
It's out there for the Western world. But I
Well-
mean, this is stuff we grew up with.
Okay, so
you know.
so that was what I was going to say is that it sort of it often takes, you know, it takes the neuroscientists to be like, where's there a thing and where is memory and how do we hold it and what is your DNA holding and mitochondrial DNA, and you know the West loves to take things that, you know, Eastern traditions have known for thousands of years and be like,
And
we
reintroduce
figured it
it.
out.
Yeah.
It's got a name and here's the academy where you can learn it too. But maybe can you talk a little bit about sort of what your either personal understanding of that is, and sort of where it fits?
I don't really know, to be honest. I can't speak on it as any kind of expert. I think that if you look at my family, you know, I grew up my father hated taking elevators, tall buildings. I hate it. It gives me a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
Escalators, anything. My brother has the same thing. We feel very disoriented in sort of open space. I feel more so than, I can't speak again for my family, but escalators in malls where everything is open, I feel very disoriented. Big airports that are full of glass. If I don't see a boundary, I feel very physically disoriented. This got even worse after when I started, I can't say I started waking up, but when I really began to understand what was happening with me, I still feel very disoriented if I'm in an open space without any boundaries.
Mhm.
I don't know where that comes from. I think if I look at I think my grandfather didn't like heights. I mean, you know, my dad doesn't like claustrophobia. My dad had a panic attack in Las Vegas because it's just too claustrophobic. I have an aunt who's claustrophobic. So I think some of that physical manifestation of trauma does come from your DNA. I spent a long time trying to get over it, and then I just said, forget it. I mean, if I don't climb Mount Everest in this lifetime, what's the big deal?
So would you put that under the umbrella of ancestral trauma?
Probably.
Okay.
But also there was a great freedom in saying, if I don't go to the top of the Burj Khalifa in this lifetime, big deal. If I don't go to Magic Space Mountain or whatever, and what's the roller coaster place? I don't know. If I don't go to some roller coaster to prove that I have, you know, I spent like years
Right.
and years, like, I'm going to defeat my fear. And I was like, I just won't do. I mean, so what's the big deal?
You save yourself a lot of time in waiting in lines. You don't have to go to the roller coasters.
Yeah, exactly. But I also do other things that someone might feel fearful about, like standing in front of 30,000 people at Comic-Con.
So,
you know,
okay,
like so.
So can that translate to emotional things? Because I've, my feeling is I'll meet with any healer, see what they have to say, take what I like, leave the rest. I'm curious, I've had somebody do a past life regression. I don't know, like I can be open to it. I can answer her questions to the best of my ability. So that's sort of a question. Like I've had people say like, oh, you're holding, this is not yours. I've had people say that to me.
Yes.
This is not yours. So what is it? I mean, I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm just
but
saying,
I agree.
like, what's
I agree.
your...
I think that 100% it is, of course, something that comes in.
Right.
I mean, your dad
Where
gives a
does it-
sperm and your mom
Right.
gives an egg, and that has intelligence in it. That's probably where it comes
Right.
from. And then they had, from their family had that
Right.
intelligence gets passed on from bodies to bodies all the
Right.
time. That's probably where it comes from. But
Mhm.
I mean, where do thoughts come from?
Mhm.
What is a thought? Where do
Mhm.
they exist?
Wait, I'm hung up on the roller coaster thing.
Oh.
Because here's the thing. How do you know, like, how did you decide? Like, or how do we know? And I mean, this is open to anyone. How do we know this is something I should work through? Because it's a block that represents something else. And how do we decide to be like, I'm going to take my hands off this?
I have an answer.
I want the answer.
I think that I can only speak from when I started having panic attacks on the highway, which started this whole journey about 10 years ago,
Mhm.
I had to work to get back on the highway because not being on the highway was impeding my life.
Okay.
Right? Now, if I still don't love it because it still has trauma in the body, I'll do it if I have to and
Mhm.
whatever, and then I do it and it's fine. It's not a big deal. But if I don't go on a roller coaster for the rest of my life, it doesn't really matter to me. By the way, people who have severe fear of flying,
Yeah.
if that is really impeding your life completely, I think it's something to look at. And because you may realize I have physical trauma from this,
Mm.
but it's not a big deal.
Mm.
I have emotional trauma from this, but it's not a big deal.
Mhm.
It's okay. It's okay that I have a fear of heights. It doesn't make me, in a way, a lesser person.
Some people choose not to fly and then they, I don't mean to get sad, but they isolate and they believe that that's
what
a
I mean.
solution.
But I'm saying that's what I mean.
But objectively, I'm not allowed to say, you're isolating. That's not healthy.
I think it's important to look at yourself and say, hey, is this really getting in the way of my
Right.
life? And if it is, then you should look at it. And I think
Right.
looking at it is also the realization that it's not as scary as your mind is making it out to be.
Sure.
But I guess that for me at least, answered the question of if it's impeding your life, take a look at it.
Right.
If it's something
just-
that's
there's still
trivial in your
subjectivity
life.
to that, but yeah.
Exactly.
Well, there's two things that you said about characters. You talked about knowing how they stand, how they think, how they would act. Does having that knowledge help you know yourself more when you step out of a character?
I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it's funny because I sometimes feel, more comfortable on a stage than not. There's a safety in if you put me in a box, like.
Because I wondered how much do each of us spend time. I don't think about how I stand until I have a pain in my hip and then I go to the physical therapist and they're like, oh, you're leaning this way. But like as an actor, you're like, oh, my character leans this way.
Right.
Therefore, I wondered as you step out of that role and back into yourself, do you spend the same amount of time thinking about how you think, how you feel, how you act, how you stand as much as you do the character?
I think most actors do have a sense of self-awareness. I think going back to what Osho said, I think he said something, it's the most spiritual because you're playing a character, but you're aware you're playing a character. So I think there is something to be said about a lot of actors being quite self-aware.
Yeah, but you're forced to think about it in a different way. It's more contrived.
I want to go back to what you said about being on stage and sort of forgetting. There's something very sort of meditative about acting because it is an act of self-forgetting, which if you've never experienced a deep state of meditation, you don't really know what it is to be completely self-forgotten, where you are just the thing before you put on the thing, right? I remember in college, the reason I became an actor because I was doing a play. I think I may have spoken about this last time, but I was doing the Rose Tattoo, and I was playing the lead Italian guy because I was the closest to an Italian-looking guy in Portland, Oregon.
Like-
But I remember putting on a silk shirt in a scene, and it wasn't real silk, but it looked like silk, and I had to act as if it was real silk. And I remember doing that scene, and for 1 second,
Hmm.
I was that person putting on that silk shirt.
It was silk.
It was like half a second
Mm.
of complete truth.
Mm.
And it was, now when I look back, a very deep awakening moment. I didn't know at the time. But I think there's something about acting that helps us self-forget. And all of this really is kind of shaving down the grip that our psychological story has on us. And I think that's why I find acting very meditative, because it's very much about self-forgetting.
It's beautiful.
That is beautiful. I mean, I'm struck by it, and it kind of leads to my other point, but maybe not. We'll see. When you talk about truth and finding truth, my hypothesis is that truth exists as a vibrational frequency that the artist taps into.
Sure.
And when someone is finding a character, I actually think maybe that character exists somewhere and the
Beautiful.
actor is finding it and co-creating it, like plugging into something
Gorgeous.
that already exists, which then when I think about the nature of ancestral, and I don't even think about it as trauma, I think about it almost as the ancestral memory.
Energetic memory, maybe? Yeah.
Exactly. So when we think about an experience and we come from the lineage of experience, when we are born, we tap into that as like a network frequency and we can't help that. So then it goes to sort of, well, where does that exist around us? And as we forget more about our story, the next layer is maybe to become more aware of these energetic, not entanglements, but frequencies that are around us. And I don't want to use the matrix because it's a loaded term, but
we're sitting on a spinning planet in the middle of infinite space. I mean, it's probably all around us.
All around us, exactly.
Yet we're thinking about, why did my, mother-in-law yell at me today? I don't know why I said mother-in-law. I love my mother-in-law. But I mean, I find that, it's a complicated relationship sometimes. But it just going back to the beginning, like this stuff it seems so, I think everyone is just used to talking about it. Right? There's just so much talking going on. And there's a great teacher who just tell his spiritual students, just shut up. Just like shut up. Just stop, just for one moment. What happens if you in this moment just stopped all your inner doing? Still here.
It's a good pause.
You're still here. I'm not saying stop all your inner work. I'm saying that you're going to spend your whole life trying to figure it out, and you realize on your last breath that you didn't spend one moment living. Figuring out your life is not living. Yes, there's a certain amount of that you do. Having a cup of tea with a friend is living.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it really feels, to use a trite, kind of aphorism, it's like, it really is about the journey and not the destination, right? Meaning if the goal is, I'm going to get fixed, I'm going to get healed, I'm going to figure it all out.
And then I'm going to begin.
Then I'm going to live.
You'll always just go from one figuring out to another figuring out to another figuring out.
Right.
Because it's here right now. That's it.
Right.
That's it. And like I said, this moment does not care what you think about it. This is the only thing that's going on.
Right.
I don't know, maybe other things going on in your head or something, but like, this is it.
Well, Jonathan would love to talk about the collective consciousness and how you can just slice through time like a 7-layer cake, and every other moment is also existing and it's in the Akashic records, but we'll have to save that for another time.
I just wrote to you. This is a very nice energy to wrap up on because
gonna
we're
wrap
all
up
just
on this
being
energy.
here.
Kunal, thank you so much for being here. Do you want to give a shout out to anything in particular that people should look for?
For my career-wise?
Anything.
I just did a movie on Netflix called Spaceman. It's already out by the time you hear this, but that's a great movie for some of the stuff we're talking about, which is everything has a beginning and everything has an end. And yet here we are, despairing, you know. So don't despair.
Thank you so much for coming back to visit.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
That was nice. Our friend came back.
I mean, we could just stop the podcast right there, but it feels like there's too much to talk about still.
Says you. Well, what people should know is Jonathan sometimes loves a list. I made one for today before Kunal got here, and Jonathan was like, I don't know that we need the list, but I just want to say I made the list anyway. And I did pretty good in getting him to talk about a lot of the things that we wanted to talk to him about. Altered states of consciousness, Elizabeth Crone, near-death experiences, flow state,
We didn't really
energy
talk about,
body, but I hit on them.
we didn't really talk about Elizabeth Crone.
He loved that episode. He's a huge fan of our podcast, apparently.
Apparently, I don't know. He started quoting episodes. I was like, what? What's happening?
He really likes it. I think that he said our podcast is his favorite on the internet.
He did
We
say
didn't
that.
get it. We had stopped down because I wanted to give him a respectful time to talk about things off camera. So I was like, Travis, let's not record. And then he's like, your podcast is the best one.
No one's going to believe us
No
now.
one's going to believe us.
We need him to say it.
Well, maybe he'll send us a little video.
He was talking about listening to the Michael Singer episode on a train. He said,
To Manchester.
to Manchester. He was going.
Like you do.
I was struck by something he said about people feeling fatigued.
Yeah.
And I do. I think people feel a lot of overwhelm, I hear. And I'm like, where's that coming from? Is it just that we're constantly distracted? Is it just because we're cycling through?
Like, why are humans in general feeling overwhelmed?
Well, like right now, today, yes, it's the news cycle, you could say. Yes, it's the amount of time we're spending staring at screens.
I think the world is a little bit on fire. I think if you live in America and have survived the last, decade or so of political ups and downs and complexity, no matter what side you're on of anything, it's been an exhausting period. And I know people are like, it's always exhausting. History's crazy. I think these last dozen years or so have been kind of a doozy.
Yes, and also in the 50s, as it was going into the 60s, that people were like, the world is on fire and the kids are crazy and they're growing their hair out and they're smoking marijuana and reefer madness is going to... And then there was...
And now everything's legal and everyone is stoned all the time. Everything's fine.
The Cold War was not a pleasant time period. The world was going to blow up. Everything was...
No, I think the immediacy of our access to news, I think the fact that, we now live through, for example, presidencies and political processes that play out on our phones. Like, we know too much in some ways, and we also have opinions about everything. And we are absolutely living in a culture of constantly hearing what, in many cases, the most obscene, vile people think about us, about hot dogs, about people's hairstyles. Like, the internet is the place where people who previously had prickly thoughts in their head get to spit them out and amplify them by the thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. The internet also does many amazing things and connects people in wonderful ways, but a lot of people have a tremendous amount of angst about the things that exist on the internet when they try and have opinions, walk down the street, like anything.
I like when you say angst instead of angst.
It's got an umlaut, people.
Also, when we think about this in terms of frequency, the frequency of love, the way that he was able to just tap in to say everything.
What do you mean when you say frequency? Like, how do you choose to use that word? Because I thought when you said frequency, I thought you meant the speed at which information comes to us and the number of times we have to experience things. You're talking about a different frequency.
I'm talking about an energetic frequency. And I use frequency because I don't know what else to call it. You can call it resonance. You can call it vibrational tone.
What is it?
You can call it...
What it feels like?
At times, he has an ability to drop into a way of speaking and an optimism and knowledge that I do believe transcends words and makes people feel. It hits them viscerally. How does that happen? It's the tone of his voice for sure. It's the speed at which he's speaking, but it's also for me a truth and a resonance in the words that he's using that has a wisdom to it, and that if we are here as a experiment to quote unquote know ourselves, to have the experience of feeling love and connection in a physical form, which is a cascade of chemicals that may not exist anywhere else in the intergalactic universe that we know of, at least. And that if there are aliens out there, they're probably not in physical form. So we have this unique experience as human beings in this physical form to feel horrific pain, but also euphoric pleasure. And I'm not even talking about, ecstatic pleasure or sexual pleasure. I'm talking about like a love and depth of emotion that is uniquely the human experience, is uniquely human. And in order to do that, you need to, as Jewel says in her episode, you can either be in dilation or you can be in contraction. And the level of opening that happens when we feel like there is hope, when we feel like no matter what we're going through, it's going to be okay. When we can slow down the narrative, the speed of our thinking, that starts to be an altered state of consciousness. We talk about these magical ways of getting outside of ourselves and accessing other realms and meeting God and sitting on a bench, as we talked about in the Struck by Lightning episode. But simply, in the moments of this interview where he really starts to deal hope, hand out optimism, he's tapping into a frequency that resonates, that can be felt, and that can literally hit someone and change them. And I feel like that is so powerful. And when you spend time in that frequency, you are not tired because you are uplifted. And that's, for me, what connects back to this notion of we are fatigued. We are fatigued, yes, because we are spending too much time on screens, when we're not out in nature enough, but more so, we are not giving ourselves enough time spent in a sense of wonder, in a sense of optimism, in a sense of gratitude and prayer. And when we do get time to do that, our entire sense of self, our quote unquote energy bodies, are uplifted, and we have a vitality to us that can transcend the more taxing aspects of modern day life.
And I think that's well said. And I think it's also different for everyone. And I think that's what's sort of the challenge, is that that may work for some people and it may not work for others, or it may not work in the same way. Some people need a different messenger. Some people need a different message. So that's why it kind of takes all kinds. And I think that's sort of, that's, I think what one of the things that I really took from that is like, you have to find it. You have to find whatever works for you.
100% it takes all kinds, and everyone needs to find that thing. But fundamentally, if there are only two states, I am contracted
Right.
or I'm dilated, there is fear or love.
Right.
The more time, and whoever gets you to a sense of love, of optimism, of potential hope,
Yeah.
of feeling that whatever situation you are in has a level of both acceptance where you are not fighting against the exercise, and that there is some light at the end of whatever tunnel you're in. Whatever it is that you can access that helps you look at the sky a little bit more, look at the person across from you and have appreciation for them, look at even someone you're annoyed with and reduce the annoyance into
I'm trying
acceptance.
actively right now. No, but I think that makes sense.
That is energizing.
So that makes sense to me, because also, I didn't grow up with like a God is love concept, meaning that's not a language that is used in the tradition that I come from. And I would meet, in particular, often Christian people who were like, God is love. And, there's a meeting that I go to that's held, it's a non-religious meeting, but it's held in a church, and there's this huge sign, it's like God is love, and I'm like, what is that? But that's kind of what we're talking about, is that even if you believe in God, don't believe in God, I don't care. If the notion of what is bigger than you is something hopeful, and is something that you can try and achieve with goodness in your heart for the ultimate good, love is on that path, hope is on that path. That's what religious people would turn into like, that's God, that's divine. Whatever gets me there, that's what I want. And, I've talked about, I recently watched the very complicated and painful, documentary about the Hare Krishna movement. And there's a lot of complexity that the documentary deals with. But the notion of the Hare Krishna movement was you can be high all the time without drugs if you are constantly tapping into, as you say, this vibrational frequency. We're all love. Everything's love. Everything you do, if it is directed towards positivity, hope, and love, that's where we all get to live. It's a choice,
Can I tell you a story that I've never really spoken about on this podcast?
Sure.
You've asked me to talk about this, and I have shied away from it quite a bit. You asked me, how do I know things? Or what is energy and where did I explore that? And I think I've talked sort of around it, but there's something about my experience of being introduced to it that feels particularly applicable to this episode. And actually, it's strange because I began to think about it about a day and a half ago. I started thinking about this story and I was like, I have no plans on sharing it today, but it felt like it started to come into my awareness and I started thinking about it before today's episode. So when I was 17, after a family tragedy, when I was 14, 3 years had passed, my family was a big wreck. I was extremely, extremely depressed, shut down emotionally, totally distracted, couldn't really function in normal, like I couldn't pay attention at school. I was very, very still in trauma. I went to a 4-day class that was a Reiki, learning how to do Reiki. But I since learned that it wasn't only that. There was another modality. There were other learnings to be had there. And for the first 3 days, this woman was like, we all have energy in our bodies. And I'm not hearing any of it. It's a 4-person class. It's from a Friday through a Sunday. A Thursday through a Sunday. A Thursday night, a Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Thursday night happens and I'm like, I never want to go back there. This is all nonsense.
Like the first time we met.
Friday, I go, same sort of experience, but there's hands-on work. And hands-on work is literally you lie on a massage table fully clothed and people go through, place hands on your body in different hand positions. And the theory is that energy is supposed to move through one person. They're supposed to learn how to tap into a universal source of energy, pass that energy through to someone else who is receiving on the table. And that energy taps into your body's natural ability to heal, it says, and it helps move things through. It's more complicated than that, but that's the high level. I'm like, I don't understand energy. I don't know what these people are talking about. Saturday comes, same thing. Sunday's happening, and I'm the practitioner with someone on the table, and my hands are on
wait, hold on 1 second. So you go through all these days. Do you like raise your hand and say like, this is bullshit? Or you're just like going through the motions, doing your best, or like hiding that you don't really get it? Like
So here's the context. My sister had worked with this woman. My sister had extreme physical disability to the point where she couldn't walk upstairs.
Your sister was experiencing some physical challenges.
From the time my sister was 11 to the time she was in her early 20s, she had extreme physical challenges. She was at one point diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which at that time, which is almost, it's going to be 25 years or more ago, 30 years ago. Half the doctor said it's all in your head. Half the doctor said it's an actual condition. She went through endless doctors before they found any sort of diagnosis for her. And she was often in chronic and debilitating pain, seeing physiotherapists, doing every type of exercise. And when my brother's accident happened, she was in a wheelchair. Her level of chronic pain increased drastically. So there was a emotional component to what she was going through. And she worked with this woman as part of a larger life-changing, many life-changing things that she did. And she was like, look, Jonathan, you're in a bad state. Our parents were willing to pay for me to go to this woman and to learn this practice. I had seen the changes that my sister had. And part of me, my kid brain was like, oh, there's some sort of magic that can happen. And so I decided I'm going to go to the class and I'm going to learn. And I kind of thought I was going to get like, press this part of the body and this magical thing was going to happen, or say this phrase and this thing unlocks and all of a sudden pain goes away. And in order to get my parents to agree to pay for me to do the course, I had to promise that I would stay the whole course, because they knew I had a tendency to like dismiss things very quickly. So I don't raise my hand. I'm like, I'm stuck here because I've committed to it. So I'm just going to kind of grit and bear it and get through it. And at the end, I'll never come back again. And what happens on Sunday, as I'm the practitioner.
You're chosen to be the person with putting your hands on someone else.
Yeah, it's again, 4-person class. We've all taken turns. I've had my hands.
Have you felt anything when anybody?
I have not felt anything yet.
When someone else put their hands on you?
Yeah, and I don't feel anything.
You just lay there.
I just lay there. Now, to give context to this, I don't feel anything because I am cycling in my head and my head will not stop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know this at the time,
right?
But my willingness to feel anything has been totally shut down because
like literally anything.
Anything at all,
right.
Because the trauma that I was running from and the sadness that I had not processed were so strong that
right.
To allow myself to feel anything at all would open me up to a well of
right.
emotion that I was not willing or able to deal with. But in that Sunday, my hands are over someone's eyes. So imagine someone sitting on this table lying on the table in front of me, face up.
Your hands are on their eyes.
My hands are on their eyes.
You're cupping their eyes.
Cupping their eyes, fingers down.
Gentle.
Barely touching, resting but barely touching. And all of a sudden, in the center of my palm, I feel a pulse. It starts to radiate. And it's an unmistakable feeling. My hands start to get hot and they're vibrating. And I kind of look at the teacher and the teacher looks at me and there's an assistant as the third person and then myself and another student. And it was an unmistakable feeling and that lasted for a while.
What's a while?
The session was maybe an hour.
Oh.
I start feeling it 10 minutes in. I moved through different hand positions and each time my hand gets more and more intense and has this vibratory quality to it. There's an energy moving through me. And the thing that you say while you're putting hands on is that I allow myself to leave my baggage at the door to be a clear and open channel to allow Reiki to flow freely through me for the highest good of this other person.
Mm-hmm.
You are moving yourself outside to become a vessel, to become a conduit so that this person can receive what they need to.
Mm-hmm.
It stops to become about you. It becomes about being an act of service. And all of a sudden, it's like more than my hands. It's in something else. I could feel it in my body. There's a movement that's happening. And that experience leads me to start questioning the nature of reality because I don't believe in energy. I don't believe that energy can be tapped into. I don't believe in a universe. I don't believe in any of that. But whatever I felt, that experience was so unbelievably distinct and unique, I couldn't put the genie back into the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And how this connects to what we were talking about before is that in the next 3 years, I get really into somatic body work, which is basically tracking the emotion that people have that's stored in the body using these similar techniques and being able to train my hands to track that and to help watch the breath, watch their emotions, watch how they move, and start to feel where things are stuck. And I spend a lot of time working with this practitioner and the group of people that she has trained and students that she has. And when doing that work, which is whatever comes up, there's going to be pain, but you're going to move through it. It has a very meditative quality, similar to some of the conversation earlier in this episode. It's always wildly optimistic and like there's a high to it. It is not, drug related or anything like that, but it's energizing. And the connection point here is that it is outside of story. It is outside of the mind thinking. It's outside of trying to intellectually grapple with anything. And it's tapping into a force or a frequency that is, there's a truth to it. When people are walking around and holding on to emotions that are trapped, there's a movement, the greatest force in the universe is the tree trying to maintain its equilibrium. We're all have that. We're all trying to maintain some form of equilibrium. The way that the brain tries to keep the eye line straight so that we can continue to walk and move forward is the similar way that we all try and heal ourselves. We're all in the process of whatever we've gone through. We're trying to continue to keep going and by whatever means are necessary. And I believe that there's an energetic force in the universe that helps us to do that. And things get in the way, of course. We have blockages. We have run into family, you can call it past family experiences that make that more difficult for us. But when we're tapping into that sense of authenticity, where we're not trying to hide from ourselves, I think that we all feel much more uplifted, empowered, and energized to move forward because there's hope in that.
Thank you for sharing that. It's very powerful.
It also began to let me explore this idea of there being like larger frequencies to tap into based on either our thinking or on a larger system of energy coming from family systems.
What this makes me, kind of think about is, the variety of ways that people have a human experience. And, you might not have taken that class. If your sister hadn't had the challenges she had, if your brother hadn't had his accident, which exacerbated her, like everything, this is where people talk about like things fall into place. What does it mean to trust? What does it mean to trust? I mean, a lot of people call it God, but what does it mean to put your trust in the universe so that you don't see that the world is conspiring against you or that your existence here is just suffering, but that these are all the things that happen. And one thing inevitably will lead to another. And as Kunal talked about, like, what if there's nothing to figure out? What if that's your path? All these things. This is what led to this, and that's what led to that. And that's how we got to sitting here and you telling this story. And like, maybe we never would have met Valerie if she hadn't, taken that class, or Travis wouldn't have been here if he hadn't, had an interest in like being good at the things that his brain, like everybody gets to use their brain for however they are on their path. And then it gets all put together into all these different, conglomerations of our experience. But, the thing that for me feels hopeful is, and this is, my religious tradition, it talks about unity and oneness. Like that's our big deal, is like there's a oneness. And for me, that's the most comforting part of it, that you don't even have to believe what I believe. I don't have to believe what you believe. There's one thing that governs all of it, and it governs everybody's path differently. And some people choose to call it God, and some people call it the universe, and other people call it just like what I'm going to think about today.
I love that. And it connects for me to what Kunal was saying about we all have the ability to access this sense of feeling ourselves, this sense of feeling one. For me, that feeling required me to feel anything. And as I began
It's an opening.
And as I began to learn how to feel slightly more than nothing, I began to then have the access to feel connected to someone in the room, connected to the fact that there may be something greater than myself at some point. And that was for me the opening. So I love this notion of everyone has a different path. And I think if people haven't felt a sense of themselves, a sense of something greater than themselves, what might be the emotional block that they're holding on to so strongly that they can't feel something else?
Yeah. Some people might hear that and feel like, I don't need to know. But I think if I learned anything from having Kunal here today, it's that there's value in figuring it out.
Absolutely.
Well, from our breakdown to the one we hope you never have, feels like a good place to end.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or two. One fiction, and now she's gonna break down